Hey, I'm Barrett Holland. I'm a volunteer with Not Forgotten Ministries. And I want to tell you a story today that I hope will encourage you. I'm a sidewalk advocate with Not Forgotten. And I know sometimes when we're out on the sidewalk, we can wonder, is this really working? Is this making any difference? Well, I want to tell you that we never know. Any day that we're out there, God could have a divine appointment ready for us. And I want to tell you a story of something that happened to me about a month ago on the sidewalk that is evidence that that is true. This morning comes around, Friday morning, I go out to volunteer. The weather is as expected, horrible. It's cold, it's rainy, it's overcast. And when I walk up, immediately I notice something's off because there are no other volunteers. And if you've ever volunteered on the sidewalk, you know, during the shift change, there's always a time where there are other volunteers. So I texted the volunteer coordinator and said, hey, what's the deal? Why is no one out here to volunteer today? And she said, oh, I'm so sorry. Because of the weather, we canceled it today. People couldn't come out, so we just said, hey, we're gonna call off all the volunteering. Well, I'm thinking in my mind, okay, well, I guess I tried to honor God, but secretly I'm thinking, great, now I can go home. I don't have to be in the weather anymore. So I texted our group leader, my friend who was gonna come out and volunteer with me, and I said, hey, I'm gonna take off. There are no volunteers. He said, wait, what's the situation? There's no one out there. There's no, well, hold on, I'm 15 minutes away. I'll come, we'll volunteer together. I thought, no, oh no. Well, it just so happened that Tori, our ministry director, happened to be in her office that day. She's never in her office on Fridays. And so we went up there, got all the materials from her, and went back down to volunteer. We were on the sidewalk for not 15 or 20 minutes, and a car pulled up. And you know, often cars don't stop, but this car stopped. They actually rolled down the window, and I looked into the car, and I immediately recognized the driver. It's a young man. I happen to know that he's a professing Christian. He immediately recognized me as well. He said, Barrett? I said, yeah. And we start talking. I see that there's a young lady sitting in the passenger seat. They both look overwhelmed. They both look terrified. Well, it turns out I haven't seen this young man in about a year and a half, but since I'd last seen him, he had begun dating this young lady. Neither of them were working at the time. They found themselves in an unexpected pregnancy situation. They felt overwhelmed. They felt they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the living situation, that they didn't have the parental models that they needed or the family support in order to bring a baby into the world. And they were feeling so overwhelmed that they thought our only way out is to get an abortion. And they were moments away from turning into that Planned Parenthood parking lot in Winston-Salem. Well, we start talking about Jesus, we start talking about hope, we start talking about the reality that God will make a way when it seems there is no way for those who trust Him. I start telling the guy, look, you know I'm not coming down on you. I'm not a perfect person, but I'm telling you there's a right choice and there's a wrong choice. Would you make the right choice today? We keep going back and forth. I finally get to the point where I tell him, look, Tori, the director of the ministry that I'm serving with, she's right up the street. Would you just go to the office? She'll tell you about how terrible it is to have an abortion. She knows from personal experience it's just going to be shame and guilt. It's only going to break things worse. It's not going to help at all. It only hurts. And she'll share with you the free resources. She'll share with you all the information. Just go talk to Tori. Ask him, so will you do it? He said, no, I'm not ready for that. We have to talk. Me and her have to talk. Me and her have to talk. I said, well, okay, but just don't go into the abortion clinic parking lot. So he starts to pull up. Man, he's going like 2 miles per hour. I'm like, why are you driving so slow? Drive faster, drive away. I'm praying and praying and praying. Lord, please help them not turn into the parking lot. He passes the parking lot, goes down to the end of the street where my Revo friend is, and he turns off out of my line of sight. The young man in the car called me. I said, yeah. What's going on? He said, we want to talk to Tori. I said, really? This has never happened to me on the sidewalk before. I said, really? He said, yeah. So I start walking down there. I'm trying to keep it cool and not just flat out sprint all the way down the street. I get to where they are, knock on the window. He gets out. They're both shaking still feeling very overwhelmed by their situation. I said, what happened? He said, I just really needed to hear what you said. I just needed to hear that. I said, so you want to talk to Tori? He said, yeah, we'll go. I said, well, let's just walk right up the street It's just a block and a half up the street. I didn't want them to get back in the car. I was afraid they were going to drive away. I said, let's go talk to Tori. We walk up there together and I start telling him the whole story. I said, you don't understand how many things God had to do for me to talk to you today. I didn't want to come. I was making up for not volunteering last week. It was going to be cold and rainy. I didn't want to come. I went to my R group last night and we studied the story of the prodigal son. I said, have you ever heard the story of the prodigal son? I start telling him and the young lady the story as we're walking up the street. I said, the story tells us that there's a Father in God who loves us. And I believe that that same God looked at you today. And when you felt that you were a long way off, when you felt just shame and guilt and fear, He ran to you. And He wrapped you up in a big bear hug and He said, I love you. You're mine. You're my son. You're my daughter, and I'm not going to let you make this choice. I love you too much. They're overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. I'm starting to tear up. Gary, my friend, is already crying down on the sidewalk where he is. We're just overcome with emotion. We get up to Tori's office. She welcomes them in like a rock star as always, just so kind, so loving. So they start to have their meeting and I asked the young man, I said, hey, do you want me to stay with you guys? I know that it's a lot happening at once, that you don't know Tori, you know me. Would it be helpful for me to stay? And the young man looked at me and he said, no, I want you to go back out to the sidewalk. Maybe you can share with some other people. Maybe you can help them make the right choice too. And I knew in that moment that he was home. The Father had brought him home. So I know that sometimes it feels like when we're out there on the sidewalk that maybe it's not making a difference, that people are just passing, that people aren't stopping, that we don't see those kind of stories every day, but we never know on which day there's a divine appointment. We never know on which day God's been preparing someone's heart. We never know on which day we're going to get stories like that. That young couple has been paired up with mentors through Not Forgotten, who have been texting them, reaching out to them. They've continued in contact with our local church, Revo. They've attended the church. We're trying to get them set up with a small group in our group where they can have Christian community rallying around them at the local church level as well. And as that young man has been praying, a young man who went from not having a job now has a steady job. And hear this, in the weeks since he started that job, he's already been promoted. God is providing for that young family. And God is doing it all through ministries like Not Forgotten Ministries. So I'll encourage you, keep volunteering, keep going out on the front lines of ministry and life change in our community. And I expect to hear more and more stories as we keep showing up and trusting God to do what only He can do.